Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the arrival of the platform party. Please stand as Professor Carmen Balthrop and Ms. Carla Scott from our School of Music sing the national anthems of the Republic of South Africa and the United States of America.
Let us live and strive for freedom in South Africa, our land. So proudly we hail at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we
Please be seated. Thank you, Professor Balthrop, for that inspiring rendition of the national anthems of South Africa and the United States. President Mandela, Governor Glendenning, Ambassador Sisulu, Madam Machel, Dr. Sadat, Dean Goldstein, Professor Telhami, Your Royal Highness, Your Excellencies, distinguished ambassadors, and honored guests, faculty, staff, and students. It gives me exceptional pleasure to welcome you to the 4th Anwar Sadat Lecture for Peace. We are indebted to those who have made this lecture possible, to Dr. Jahan Sadat for her vision and determination to keep her husband's ideals alive, to Professor Shibli Telhami, holder of the Anwar Sadat Chair for Peace and Development, for his tireless efforts to promote dialogue on issues of peace and to share his profound insights on Middle East issues. And to Dean Irwin Goldstein for his path-breaking leadership of the College of Behavior and Social Sciences. This lecture series is honored by the name of the great statesman and Nobel laureate Anwar Sadat, a man of historic stature who took enormous risks and paid the ultimate price in the search for peace. Today's lecture comes at a time when the entire world is engaged in a struggle for peace after a terrorist attack on our country by individuals who would impose their views on all of us through indiscriminate and savage violence. Our university family suffered losses, and we have mourned with and for our nation and our own community. In the aftermath of this national and personal tragedy, we have learned once again that the search for peace is fraught with dangers and that the realization of peace requires perseverance in principle and in action. No individual can speak to us more personally of the struggle for peace than Nelson Mandela. The risks, the dilemmas, the personal sacrifices required. A world figure of singular importance, President Mandela received the Nobel Peace Prize in 1993. He was long ago acclaimed as the Nobel laureate for peace in the hearts of freedom-loving people around the globe. We are deeply honored to have President Mandela as our speaker today and to welcome him to the University of Maryland. It is my pleasure to introduce the Governor of the State of Maryland, the Honorable Paris N. Glendenning, a great friend of the university, a passionate advocate for peace and social justice, who will welcome our speaker to Maryland. Governor Glendenning.
Thank you. What a wonderful honor to be here with President Moat and Dr. Sadat and all of our special guests to officially welcome President Mandela to Maryland. Mr. President, your visit here is especially meaningful to me as you visit this campus because I taught here for 27 years. And I reflect on those 27 years here tonight because that corresponds exactly to the number of years that you were wrongly imprisoned. And from that prison, you fought against the injustice that was apartheid. The power of your ideas transformed our world. Your impact on South Africa and the world is evidenced by the many honors that you have received: the Nobel Prize, the U.S. Congressional Gold Medal, countless honorary degrees, and honorary citizenship in countries around the globe. All of these awards pay tribute to your personal sacrifice for freedom and democracy. The aspirations of a people for self-governance cannot be denied. It can be banned, but it cannot be denied. It can be arrested, but it cannot be denied. And it can be imprisoned, but it cannot be denied. You personify the desire of a people for self-government and equality. You will forever be an inspiration to the millions of people who yearn for self-determination. Mr. President, as I mentioned a few moments ago in our conversation, I had the opportunity to visit South Africa last year and see the remarkable strength and beauty of your country. Your courage, integrity, and moral authority continue to inspire the people of your country and of the world. As you join us this evening, the response to terrorism and the conflict in Afghanistan is on all of our minds. This nation will meet our military objectives against terrorism and the Taliban. But let us also be inspired by you and to know that the real peace will not come until America and the world community ensure the aspirations of freedom for people every place and address the conditions of poverty. We must do this in Afghanistan, in Africa, and throughout the world. Hope and freedom are the victors over terrorism and totalitarianism. President Mandela, no award can fully express how deeply we respect your life's work. I know that President Moat will confer an honorary degree on you this evening. It is my pleasure at this time to present you with an honorary citizenship in the state of Maryland. But above all, I thank you for honoring us by your presence here tonight.
It is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jahan Sadat, Senior Fellow at the Center for International Development and Conflict Management at the University of Maryland, and an extraordinary humanitarian and advocate for peace. Jahan Sadat demonstrated her deep concern for the well-being of her people early in her public life. As First Lady of Egypt, she used her exemplary leadership skills in support of those whose voices were not heard in Egypt and throughout the Middle East. She worked to expand women's rights and to bring medical care to the handicapped veterans and children. Deeply committed to universal education, she established sweeping programs to eradicate illiteracy in Egypt and has been an articulate advocate of services for children and families. In her roles as teacher, scholar, activist, and humanitarian, Jahan Sadat has championed causes of peace and human rights and enhanced the legacy of her late husband, President Anwar Sadat. Widely recognized by a stream of distinguished honors, she was recently awarded the Pearl S. Buck Award by Randolph-Macon's Women's College for her humanitarian ideals and commitment to global understanding. Her vision and support for the Anwar Sadat Chair for Peace and Development at Maryland has been crucial in expanding the university's contributions to conflict resolution throughout the world. To introduce our speaker this evening, I am proud to present my colleague and very good friend, Dr. Jahan Sadat.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. President Mandela, Mrs. Michel, Governor Glending, President Moot, Dean Goldstein, Professor Talhami, honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen. We are in the presence of greatness, and these are painful and challenging times that need the voices of greatness. In these difficult times, when so many are finding themselves in the grip of fear and uncertainty, we need to remind ourselves of the bravery of men such as Anwar Sadat and Nelson Mandela. We need to remember what they sacrificed in order to bring peace and justice to their people, and by so doing, they changed the course of history. For millions of people in every corner of the globe, Nelson Mandela is a hero, a symbol of the struggle for freedom, of steadfastness in the fight against repression and domination, a man whose years of imprisonment in the battle against apartheid in South Africa has become a metaphor for the struggle for freedom everywhere. Nelson Mandela once remarked that a good head and a good heart are always a formidable combination. That combination was evident upon his release from prison. He did not allow bitterness to overcome his heart, for he sought to build, not to destroy, to defeat repression, not people, to return former enemies into new partners, not take pleasure in their pain. That act of greatness captured the world's imagination and will inspire generations to come. President Mandela's commitment to the cause of freedom did not end with his term as President of South Africa. He put it this way: I have walked that long road to freedom. I've tried not to falter. I have made missteps along the way, but I have discovered the secret that after climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb. I have taken a moment here to rest, to steal a view of the glorious vista that surrounds me, to look back on the distance I have come. But I can rest only for a moment, for with freedom comes responsibilities, and I dare not linger, for my long walk is not yet ended. President Mandela and President Sadat have so much in common. As young men, both struggled to free their countries from the bondage of injustice and oppression. Both spent many terrible years in prison because they were unwilling to compromise their principles, even it cost them their own freedom. Both went on to hold important positions in their political parties and eventually in their national governments. Both were given Nobel Peace Prizes, an honor each shared with a man who had once been an enemy. The names and deeds of Anwar Sadat and Nelson Mandela will forever occupy honorable places in the history of mankind. Above all else, they will always be known as men of peace, as outstanding leaders motivated by convictions and undying devotion to their countries and their people without desire for personal reward or recognition. Together with his extraordinary wife, Graça Machel, Mr. Mandela has focused his efforts through the Mandela Foundation and others on helping the needy, but especially children. He has continued his mediation efforts to resolve conflicts around the world. He has helped heal a troubled world in the 20th century, but continues to work for a world of freedom in the 21st century. It is my greatest honor, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce a hero to us all, a great man who today graces the Sadat Lecture for Peace, President Nelson Mandela.
President of the University, the Governor of this state, and distinguished guest. If you think I am bluffed by the presence of such a large crowd, you are making a mistake. I know why you are here. You are not here because you think the man who stands before you is of any importance. You are curious to see how a pensioner who is unemployed looks like. Now a pensioner looks like me. It is a great honor to have been invited to deliver this lecture in the name of Anwar al-Sadat, a great African leader and man who in his life faced and dealt with the complex challenges of making peace, whether within a single nation or amongst nations. One can, of course, not speak of Anwar Sadat without thinking and paying tribute to his great mentor and presidential predecessor, Colonel Gamal Abdel Nasser. His name shines brightly in the gallery of African heroes, liberators, and statesmen. And we salute his memory tonight. Many of you will remember that in Africa here, there were two blocks, the Monrovia Group and the Casablanca Group. The Casablanca Group was the most progressive in its attitude towards the liberation movements in Africa and in relation to its attitude towards the Western world. And Egypt, under Colonel Nasser, as well as King Mohammed V of Morocco, Algeria, Ghana, and Mali were in the Casablanca Group. And it is in the light of this background that in addition to Anwar Sadat, we think of Colonel Nasser. It was thought proper to give as the title to our own autobiography the phrase, and I quote, "Long walk to freedom," unquote. I shall not pretend to be a literary critic, even where it concerns a work written by myself. What I can say about that phrase is that it not only signals retrospectively the length of struggle to attain freedom and peace, it is also, one hopes, a call to readers to be ever attentive that the struggle for freedom and peace is a continuing one. We do not ever reach an end to a road where we can sit down and lay down tools. Recent and current events in the world have forced us to renew and perhaps even in new ways to focus on the complexities of maintaining, establishing, and consolidating peace in our own planet. We were hopeful that the beginning of the new century was increasingly witnessing the dawn of consensus about global responsibility for peace. The terrible audacity of the events of 11 September 2001 shook all of us out of preconceptions about peace and security in the world. It is not clear that we have already fully comprehended the implications and consequences of what happened on that day. But surely, the world will not be the same after those events. The events, with such a cold-blooded efficiency, executed in the heart of the most powerful nation in the world, reminded that of all the world, as the entire world stands exposed to terrorism that confounds because of its utter and ultimate lack of respect for law and convention. Acts of terrorism have, of course, not been confined to those we saw in New York and Washington on the 11th of September. Many parts of the world, too many parts in fact, continue to be haunted by this scourge that is terrorism. It assumes many forms and presents itself as in service of many causes. Its moral issues is around the pursuit. I'm so sorry. I skipped a page. I must say I know a president of a big country who used to confuse his papers. He would start from page 1 and go to page 5 and come back to page 3. And he would then read and finish his speech without discovering that he had made a mistake. At least I know I made a mistake. I say that terrorism assumes many forms and presents itself as in service of many causes. Its defining feature is its ruthless and deliberate attack on innocent civilians. It was the perversely spectacular nature of the events of 11 September, and not that other lives lost are less valued than those, that focused the world's mind anew on the threat of terrorism. It starkly confronted us with some of the ultimate implications of the ultimate lack of respect for law and convention. We have had occasion to express ourselves publicly in support of the current military actions by the United States and Britain in pursuit of those they identified as the perpetrators of the acts of terror. We accept that the United States and Britain are bent on bringing to book the identified terrorists, and that the unfortunate civilian casualties that arise are coincidental. We accept that they will and are taking all precautions possible within a war situation to minimize civilian casualties and suffering. But before I proceed, there are certain hard facts we must accept about this attack on the 11th of September. The efficient manner in which it was executed. Thank you. The efficient manner in which it was executed shows that the preparations for this attack must have taken a long time indeed. I wouldn't be surprised if those preparations took more than 2 years. What is disturbing is that the West, with all its technology, its intelligence services, its enormous resources, was unable to have a clue of what was being prepared. And they only became aware when the attack was actually launched. That has serious implications and challenges some of the platitudes which the West has repeatedly told us, that they are superior in intelligence to the developing world. And the fact that they had no clue whatsoever of such elaborate preparations has got serious implications. The tragedy of war, and therefore one of the main reasons why we should redouble our collective efforts to create a world in which war shall have no place, is that inevitable innocent civilians and bystanders suffer and die in the process of war infrastructure, so vital to the lives of ordinary citizens, gets destroyed. This is undoubtedly happening again in the military activities conducted by the United States and Britain in Afghanistan. Those in that country, already so devastated by war and conflict, who refuse to cooperate with the international forces against terrorism, have brought this war on the country and are the ones in the first place responsible for this further tragic suffering. We must wish that the military action needed in pursuit of the objectives against terrorism will be concluded in the shortest time possible, and that the world attention can turn to other forms of action required to combat and eradicate terrorism, thereby creating a safer and more secure world for all. We trust that the international community and agencies will be giving all the humanitarian assistance possible to the people of Afghanistan now already in the conditions of war, and also on the longer term, as that country needs to be reconstructed after so much war and suffering. We must trust above all that in Afghanistan and all over the world, democracy will be established and the interests and well-being of the people will be supreme. We shall not be as arrogant to dictate that one particular form of democracy that we are used to and practice in our own country provides the answer to all situations. There are countries without the popular institutions we know that provide in the social and economic needs of their citizens to a far greater extent than many of the popular democracies. What one is asking for is that government serves the people and that the interest be the priority in national life. In a world where, as we are witnessing, the pursuit of peace and the conduct of war sometimes coincide, it is absolutely necessary that our international and multilateral bodies become more effective as agencies for conflict management of conflict, resolution and prevention, and in the fight against terrorism. The manner in which virtually all of the nations of the world responded to condemn terrorism provides the basis for multilateral action with the United Nations, particularly is a key in this regard. The support that the United States and Britain have received from the international community for their stance and action against terrorism must surely in future encourage them to lend their stronger support to making our world body an effective and potent agency for dealing with these international issues affecting peace and our common safety. Now, it is common knowledge that the First World War broke out in 1914 and ended 4 years later. 21 years later, the Second World War broke out and ended in 1945. It is now 56 years after the end of the Second World War. There has been no world war. Indeed, there have been many conflicts, civil and regional, but no world war. That is because we now have international bodies in which the majority of the states are members, and that the most dominant of all these is the United Nations, whose charter provides that all members must seek to resolve their problems through peaceful means. And therefore, It is the duty of every country, big and small, to respect the United Nations. We condemn countries, no matter who they are, that avoid the United Nations and take action independently of the world body and violate the integrity of other countries, whatever the excuse is, because in that way they are introducing chaos in international affairs. Unless they say we can avoid the United Nations, although we're members, and go and attack another country, but you have no right to do so. It is something that we have to condemn in the strongest terms. If you're a public figure, you don't hesitate to criticize any country, even those countries who happen to assist in the development of your country. You must thank them. We must thank them when they do good, but we must criticize and even condemn them when they deviate from the basic rules the international community has laid down to ensure that problems are settled peacefully through negotiations and through respect for the international structures that have been created. It is often warned that the current conflict should not be dealt with in a manner that divides the Islamic and non-Islamic world. We have right at the outset, and also in our communications with President Bush 2 days ago, said that any campaign conducted should be against terrorism, not against Muslims or Arab nations and people. When this attack occurred, I made a statement in South Africa, which was publicized very widely, in which I condemned in the strongest terms the attack on the 11th of September. And I called for the accurate identification of all the terrorists who were responsible, both at the masterminds and those who carried out this act. And I said that they should be heavily punished. But at the same time, I said I hope this attack will not lead to the rise of an anti-Arab and anti-Muslim feeling, because it is not the Arabs, it is not the Muslims who are responsible for this attack. Those people who have launched the attack and covered themselves as people who are acting in the interest of the Muslim religion are hypocrites, because the Holy Prophet Muhammad made it clear that human relations must be based on respect for one another, and that problems should be solved through negotiations. We almost regard it as offensive to repeat that warning as if Islam is in any way implicated. Leaders in the Islamic world have expressed themselves as strongly as any against terrorism, and those acts of terror have been strongly condemned. Islamic countries form an important bulwark against terrorism, as any other bloc of countries in the international community. I must also add that when I came out of prison and I went to the Middle East, went round the Arab world, I was shocked because the Arab countries have been presented as countries that have no respect for democracy, where there are no votes, where there are no parliaments. Indeed, I found that there were no votes, there was no parliament. We want all countries, including the Arab states, to introduce a representative government. But the West must not bluff itself and think that when they talk of democratic government, they are superior to the Arab countries. There are certain respects in which the Arab countries, especially the Saudi Arabian Kingdom, the United Arab Emirates, Brunei, have served their people in a way which you do not see in the West at all. Saudi Arabia, for example, has free education from the primary level right up to university. And at university, the students are given an allowance of $400 a month. They have free health services. There are no taxes. Housing is so heavily subsidized that to get a house is something next to nothing. You don't find that in the West. You live at the center of New York and you go to Harlem, you will find that poverty will stare you in the face. Of course, we found poverty everywhere, including the Arab countries. But from the point of view of treating their people, the Arabs are doing far better than the West. And talking about Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, the leader of government has more contact with his people than is done in the West. In Saudi Arabia, the crown prince, who is now the vassal ruler, every Tuesday, he sees anybody that wants to see him. He sees thousands, listens to their demands and to their complaints, and wherever possible, tries to address them. Nothing of the sort in the West. And you must also realize that in a country like the United States of America, you cannot be a mayor, a governor, or a president if you are not wealthy. I was reading the other day to find that a mayoral campaign cost one candidate $300 million. Where would a common man get $300 to be able to be a mayor, to be a governor, to be a president? So, especially the students, all the leaders of thought must understand what is the world in which they live. And they must not be taken up by propaganda, which in many cases is actuated by other interests different from serving the nation. The longer-term issues in the fight to eradicate terrorism, and this does not mean that these will have to wait for later to be addressed, concern the resolution of conflicts in many areas and the developmental needs of poorer countries and regions. It is appropriate in this Sadat lecture that we should point specifically to the situation in the Middle East and the imperative that a lasting and just settlement be found to that long simmering conflict. Towards the end of 1999, we visited a number of capitals in that region and stipulated 3 conditions for finding a settlement. We repeat those conditions now. Firstly, the withdrawal of Israel from all occupied Arab territories. Secondly, the unequivocal commitment by the Arab countries to the right of Israel to exist within secure borders. The aim of the attack by the Arab states on Israel in 1967 was to obliterate Israel from the face of the earth. Israel fought back and defeated the Arab armies. So the Arabs must themselves make a clear statement that they recognize the existence of the State of Israel within secured boundaries, and also to establish diplomatic relations with that country. Thirdly, an international commission acceptable to both parties to oversee the negotiations and implementation of these agreements. That is what will bring about a solution. The Western countries, ever since the end of that Six-Day War in 1967, have been trying to bring about peace in the Middle East. Not so much peace for the Middle East. The main aim of each country was to make sure that each country will have the honor of having brought about peace in the Middle East. As a result, there was competition. The United States of America and Britain would make a move. France would oppose that move. Russia would oppose France, Britain, and the United States. So there was that competition. And that is why I suggested that we must have an international negotiating machinery composed of the United States, Britain, France, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt. And when I said this to President Bush the other day, after expressing my serious reservations that he refused to meet President Arafat when he had met Mr. Sharon, I said, Mr. President, that was a serious mistake. It confirms the perception that the United States is a friend of Israel and therefore is not an impartial negotiator. And I said to him, you must accept this proposal because it is the only one that will bring about peace in the Middle East. And I made it clear that I have never doubted the integrity of President Bush, the father of the present president. I never doubted the integrity of President Clinton. I said, I do not doubt your integrity. But this is the perception. And your failure to see Arafat strengthens that perception. At the same time, I must indicate that President Bush, to me, appears to be keen to do the right thing. He appears to agree with the statement that was made by President Clinton when he paid a state visit to South Africa. He said, we Americans have been asking a wrong question. We have been saying, what can we do for Africa? That was a wrong question. The right question should have been, what can we do with Africa? And I said to the President, that was a radical change in the policy, foreign policy of the United States of America. And I complimented President Bush for having invited leaders like President Mbeki, President Obasanjo of Nigeria, and other African leaders to listen to their views, their demands, and to try and shape the foreign policy of the United States in accordance with what the leaders think. There are many other parts of the world where violent conflicts continue to rage. In all of this, the world, through the world body and regional organizations, needs to be involved as the common concern of all humanity. In Burundi, for example, we have just managed, with the assistance of the international community, to reach a political agreement amongst the negotiating parties with a transitional government of national unity installed on 1st November. Now the support of the United Nations and the international community is required for peacekeeping activities, and particularly for the development of that poor country. Ultimately, the world must take common and global responsibility for social and economic development all over the globe, while the divide between the rich and the poor, with the latter vastly outnumbering the former, continues to grow. We allow fertile breeding ground for discontent and for extremism and terrorism. Our fight for peace is also, and importantly, a war against poverty and deprivation. The challenges of finding peace are as complex now as they were in the times of Anwar Sadat. The events of recent and current times may just be the warning sound for us to take a global responsibility for addressing the expressions as well as the underlying causes of terrorism and other threats against peace. The long walk to freedom, the constant struggle for peace continues. It never was an easy road, and is certainly not so now. We have to reconnoiter many difficult twists and turns and find answers to complex moral and practical questions. A global partnership on all aspects of the quest for peace makes that road considerably more negotiable. I'm grateful that you have had patience. You must remember that I'm an old man. It is my privilege to speak as long as I have the strength to do so. I thank you.
Thank you, President Mandela, for the inspiration of your presence and the inspiration of your thoughts. It's truly been a remarkable evening. It is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Shibli Telhami, holder of the Anwar Sadat Chair for Peace and Development. Dr. Telhami, an expert on issues of peace and conflict, initiated the Anwar Sadat Lecture for Peace, which has engaged leading figures to share their insights on peace issues around the globe. Dr. Telhami will present a very special gift to President Mandela. Shibli?
President Mandela, you have graced us with your presence and with your words. It is my great honor to present you with two token gifts on behalf of the University of Maryland, the Sadat Chair for Peace and Development, the Center for International Development and Conflict Management, which is directed by my renowned colleague and an expert on South Africa, Professor Ernst Wilson III, and on behalf of the Department of Government and Politics, which is chaired by my distinguished colleague, Professor Jonathan Wilkenfeld. These two gifts are products of our Sadat Art for Peace competition, which is sponsored by Mrs. Suzanne Cohen in memory of her late husband, Nathan L. Cohen. This competition is managed by the fabulous art department at the University of Maryland, and is aimed at selecting the best artwork and the best sculpture on the theme of peace. This year we have two winners whose works I will describe before I present them. The first winner is an artwork entitled Media and Its Words by Virginia Blanca Arisueno, who is a student in our art department. Mr. President, you have spoken about propaganda and the media, and this art was really representative of that theme, interestingly enough. She described it in part as follows. Media and Its Words shows several images of a woman's face presented on a TV-shaped screen. The terms presented are words related to the September 11th attacks. I believe that the media influences the majorities of people's opinions concerning the attacks. Are my opinions considerably influenced by the media? I believe that the solution for peace is not only persuasion of the masses, but also helping the population better understand what is going on in the world. And I will present to you that art in a minute. You can see it here. The second winner is a sculpture by David Page entitled Little Bag of Rocks. By pure coincidence, this art student is South African. To him, this project was profoundly personal. And allow me, if you don't mind, to read you what he said to describe it. He said, in discussions of peace and reconciliation, these words often become platitudes, desirable but meaningless. What is omitted from the debate is an understanding of the mechanics or the properties of lasting peace. It is not surprising that the lack of conflict is often mistaken for peace. The search for peace is futile because we are looking for the wrong thing. If we seek peace, we can at best hope for a truce. Meaningful peace is simply a fortunate byproduct of a diligent quest for justice. It is this necessary struggle inherent in the quest for justice that I seek to honor. A little more than a year ago, I visited Robben Island, the infamous former prison off the coast of Cape Town. For the better half of the 20th century, it exclusively housed political prisoners, the most prominent of whom was you, Mr. President. The primary activity was the quarrying of limestone on the island. The activity was extended into the bleak prison courtyard, where the inmates would reduce the rock to even smaller pieces with 4-pound hammers. The cliched prison activity of breaking rocks can be seen as a metaphor for steadfastness and resolve. For this reason, I chose shards of limestone as the primary material for this piece. Once broken, the rock cannot be reconstituted. Even if all the pieces are put back together, the change is irreversible. The collection of fragments, tightly bound together, illustrate both transformation and unity. The forged steel loop represents the will of those who refuse to see their situation as hopeless or their position as inferior. President Mandela, it is my great honor to present to you these symbolic gifts from the University of Maryland, which you have honored and graced today.
Is matter confidential? Can I have a copy of that? You are taking it. Oh, good. Yours. No, no. What you asked for? Thank you.
The honorary doctoral degree is the highest honor the university can bestow. I invite Dr. Irwin Goldstein, Dean of the College of Behavioral and Social Sciences, to read the citation of the honorary doctorate to be conferred on President Mandela. Professor Ralph Bennett, University Marshall, will come forward with the hood and diploma. You must come forward. You want to try this one here?
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mike. Because he has inspired the world by his extraordinary devotion to the cause of justice for all people, enduring great suffering with dignity and without bitterness. Because, with vision and compassion, he united his countrymen and has used his enormous prestige to improve the lives of the oppressed throughout Africa and bring peace to that continent. Because he embodies the virtues of integrity and courage and is the world's most prominent symbol of hope for those everywhere who yearn for freedom. President C.D. Moat Jr. will now confer upon President Nelson Mandela the honorary degree Doctor of Public Service.
Under the authority granted to the State of Maryland, from the State of Maryland to the Board of Regents of the University System of Maryland, and by the authority the Board has delegated to me, I am pleased and proud to confer upon President Nelson Mandela the degree Honorary Doctor of Public Service. Congratulations, Dr. Mandela. Dr. Mandela, you bring great honor to the University of Maryland and to the University System of Maryland, indeed. This has been a truly historic day for our community, and I would like to thank President Mandela, our other distinguished guests, and all of you for helping to make the 4th annual Anwar Sadat Lecture for Peace such a monumental success.
Will everyone please remain seated until the platform party has recessed? On behalf of the University of Maryland, I thank you for coming.